Bojo and hello, I'm James and I'll be your host for this season of the Everyday Forum podcast, an original Stratfest at Home podcast showcasing a sampling of the thought-provoking discussions from the Stratford Festival's 2025 Meighen Forum, the festival within the festival designed to enhance and contextualize the performances in the main Stratford Festival season. The following discussion was recorded in front of a live audience in Lazaretus Hall at the Tom Patterson Theatre in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. Enjoy! Hi everyone, I'm James Hyett. I'm the Associate Coordinator of the Meighen Forum. I'm very pleased that you're all here today to hear our discussion, the first panel of our season deep dive week here at the Forum. This one about composers and sound designers for the stage. This whole season deep dive week, the idea is sort of presenting people who make the theater happen from backstage and elsewhere in the organization. And so you're going to get a little behind the scenes look at what happens. And when I was thinking about this panel and sound design and so on, I was thinking about a project I was working on recently with a sound designer. It was an audio drama, so it was very sound focused. And I was going along with this guy. We would just sort of go on nature walks, and he would like stop every now and then just to pull out his field recorder and record, a sound or a bird. They're nodding. That's great. It was a very in touch with nature kind of vibe with this sound designer, and it led me to a very sort of deeper listening to the natural world around me as I was going about the day. And so in that spirit, I'd like to start today by acknowledging the nature around us, the land, and the beautiful waterways that run through this land, the animals and the fish and the birds and bugs and all the little creatures that populate it, the trees, for giving us much needed shade in these sunny days, and the plants, the indigenous peoples that have cared for this land, including the nations of the Neutral Confederacy and the Anishinaabe and other nations, as well as the sun and the sky and all of it. Just start with that. So, as I mentioned, I'm James. I will be moderating this panel with these two lovely people who I'll ask to introduce themselves in just a moment. And then we're going to talk about sound and all sorts of things. Partway through, our ushers will circulate some cue cards and pencils if you didn't collect them on the way in. You can use these to write down any questions you may have for our guests today, which will be brought up later on in the event, and we'll ask and answer as many as we can. So that's that. Perfect. Normally I would hand it over to the moderator, but that's me. So I'm going to hand it over to these people to introduce themselves. Why don't we start with you?
Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all here. I'm glad to see so many sound nerds in one room. My name is Deb Sinha. This year, this is my 9th season at the Stratford Festival. I sound designed, did not compose the music for, but I sound designed Anne of Green Gables. But I've also composed and sound designed many shows over the years. Romeo and Juliet last year, Casey and Diana, Women of the Fur Trade, and something else, which I can't remember the year before. Hopefully you've seen one or more of my shows that I've done here. And yeah, I'm based in Toronto, and I'm also currently faculty at the School of Performance at Toronto Metropolitan University. And I'm a drummer.
Welcome, Deb.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan of Deb.
I'm a big fan of Verne.
Hi, my name is Verne Good. I am a sound designer and audio technician on the crew here at the Festival Theatre. This year I didn't design anything, but last year I designed Twelfth Night, and in previous years Pericles, Othello, a little play over at the studio called Hirsch. And I've designed in other theaters around the country. This year I'm head of audio on As You Like It, and I also work on the musical Annie.
Thank you, Verne. Verne has also been our audio technician at the Forum she was for a while, and so we're big fans of Verne. A lot of fans here, which is great. Okay, so as I mentioned at the top, this season deep dive, these three events that we have planned for this weekend, the idea is just kind of to get behind the scenes about like what goes into making this stuff. So let's start with just a very basic, like, what is sound design? What do you do?
What do we do? What do you do is probably a better question.
I mean, sound design can encapsulate the creation of content for plays. So the soundscapes that you hear underneath or around texts or within the transition moments of a play. But it can also address what you do to tune the system. Systems design is a pretty important component in being a sound designer. And that affects musicals and what we call straight plays alike.
Yeah, I think sound design it's actually a relatively new term when it comes to theater. It's a term that started being used in the late 80s, actually. Not to say that there wasn't sound or reinforcement or any sort of technology around sound before that, but it was usually the poor ASM backstage who was like cranking the wind machine or had a slapstick or something like that. But I think what happened from the 80s on is to kind of understanding that sound had a very important role to play and that there should be somebody who's only has to deal with that because it's very complicated. When I think about sound design, there's all the technical aspects of it, which I have a certain amount of facility in, but I don't really have to understand as much. Like, well, we worked on a show. You were my head of audio for something.
Mm-hmm.
Wedding? No, it wasn't wedding band. It was something anyway. And so Verne was...
Oh, Death and the King's Horseman.
Thank you.
Here.
Yes, Death and the King's Horseman. So I was the sound designer, but what I did was as I work here and work with sound design and composer hats on, I swear to God, I'm answering the question, what is sound design? It's really about kind of like sitting in the theater and kind of going, okay, how is this hitting me? Like, how is the sound of this hitting me? How am I, as a designer, how am I designing the oral experience for you to get deeper into the story? And so that's part of what I'm thinking about. And then when I say things out loud to my head of audio, I say things like, oh, I think we need to kind of spread this out more. Or can we make that sound come out over there and then the rest of it come out over here? Or I just want that to sound like angel dust, Verne. Can you make that happen? And then Verne does like this and clicks and does the things and makes that happen. So there's a real symbiotic relationship, which is why it's so tragic that we haven't worked together more. But anyway, so it's really about designing the oral experience of the play that you're around, and whatever that might mean. It might mean creating content. It might mean finding the right thing to move around on the stage, or it might mean to talk to your technician about how things are deployed for you, and to ideally make that experience embedded within your experience of the play, all of it, the text, the acting, the movement, the dance, the music, everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like anything in theater, it's all collaboration between different people, and it sounds like from what you're saying, there's a sort of conversation between a creative sound element of, how do we heighten the text, and then a technical, how do we do that? Which I think is also typical of theater, but you see it very clearly here with sound design. How does that conversation happen back and forth? Like, are there, technical limitations that then inform the creative choices? Is that a back and forth?
Oh yeah.
Verne is nodding vigorously.
It's not absolutely necessary to know your technical limitations in order to do a sound design, like you said. The sound design approach to soundscaping is heavily, supported by, the kind of compositional approach to things. So if you're a sound designer who's more rooted in the composition side of the artistic approach, you might not know that, that this particular way of cueing something is going to be really complicated. The most technically challenging part of live theater is, in my opinion, how to actually cue stuff, to have it be seamless, but also controllable, so that, when you're when you reach a particular point in, say, a music piece, that you hit go and then it's seamlessly transitioned into the next piece of music that you want, right? It's not so much about crossfade anymore. It's about making those things line up in a way that supports the story, supports the transition, and supports whatever you're trying to do in a seamless way. That's, from my perspective, that's the most challenging.
And so does that become a conversation with the stage manager as well in terms of cueing? And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Stage manager and director and choreographer, everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think when I think about technical limitations, I find that often I'm very happy to take on, like, if somebody says to me, well, that's actually really hard to do because of X, Y, Z. I'm very happy to take that on and go, okay, then what's the solution for that? Or how do I tell that same story point in a way that is feasible? The reason we want replicability and controllability in theater is not for the same reason that we want that in, say, television or something fixed media. We want consistency so that, in a way, so that the text, the actors, and the movement and all that stuff can breathe and be realistic and be responsive to the moment. And if we know that there's a structure around that is foolproof, then that actually allows for more flexibility in the telling of the story. So I think there are some people, we've all come across conversations where people wish to do something that's actually not the best choice in terms of letting the story breathe. I'm very happy to be told, hey, so yeah, that thing you wanted to do is, here's the challenge. And the thing I love about working here is that I'm working with techs and people who are doing all the operations, who are very committed to telling a story and not just interested in just like making the machines go. And so when people come back to me to say, well, this might be tricky, I'm very happy to let go of that point and throw it out and go, okay, well, what's a different way that I can tell that story point or help that point of the story that actually is more seamless, more controllable, more consistent? Because there are many different ways to do the same thing. And I think part of the reason why I enjoy doing this work so much is that in conversation with people like my technicians, I keep looking at you like that, but you're also a composer and a sound designer. But in conversation with my technicians and the crew and the director and the actors and the text and everything else, even within that conversation, so many possibilities arise that I never would have thought about. And I think that's the thing that I love about working in theater and working collaboratively, is that you have conversations with people who have no clue what you do. They know that you make sound and that you're the sound designer, but they don't actually know what exactly it is you do back in your pajamas in your studio or during your cueing sessions so they're just really interested in talking to you about story. And so when you have those conversations, all sorts of things can arise that wouldn't normally occur to you if you were left alone. And that's, I think, part of the beauty of working in theater, is that we're constantly being inspired by each other. The lighting designer is telling me something and I go, oh, okay, that might be a better way to do this thing. Or I see the set model and I go, oh, okay, that's a way that tells me something about what the world sounds like. So yeah, the technical limitations, they're always there. I mean, tech can only get you so far. It can't get inside your head yet. There's nothing wrong with going, that's actually maybe not the best technical solution to that problem. There's always another one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we will talk about composing because you both mentioned it in a moment, but I just want to drill down on something that you said. So you mentioned being in the space and being in conversation with people, but also being in your pajamas in your studio. Like how does this work? I guess at a very basic level, how does a sound design start? How are you working on it on your own? Like, what is what's
process?
The process, or what are these different stages maybe that it goes through?
Mm-hmm. It all starts with a phone call, right? You get offered the job.
Yeah, important.
Yes.
Yeah, that's important.
And sometimes you say yes before reading the script, and sometimes you say yes after reading the script. And then you start with the script, and after a couple of pass-throughs with the script, hearing it in your head, you sit down with the director, and you hash out your ideas. And when the director already has a clear vision of where they want the show to land, kind of in what world they're going to present, what time period, what kind of feel or vibe, the more clear path I have as a sound designer or composer to take those ideas and run with. I remember one show for summer works that I did with Gideon Arthurs, and we sat down, and the only words out of his mouth were like, "I hear a lot of rocks," and I was like, "Oh, that's great!" And so the soundscape to that show became like a lot of like grinding and like landslidey type things that morphed into other things, and that was kind of fun. But so then the process becomes, after you have your meeting, you go away and you get your pajamas on, and you sit in front of your digital audio workstation, and you start creating content. And you plonk in your cues and where things go in your script, and then you take that content and you stitch it all together in QLab, which we use. It's a piece of software that we use in theater. And then it becomes the show eventually. But you work with, you can record your own sounds. You can work with sound libraries that you find online. You create things off, synthesizers or, musical instruments. And yeah, that's part of the process.
Yeah.
The other part of the process, of course, is bringing this all to life in the theater in our tech time. And that is when the collaboration really hits the road, because it's the I don't like using the word feedback in audio, but the feedback is immediate. Because you're seeing your sound that has thus far really only lived in your head, or if you're lucky, you get to play it sometimes in rehearsals. But you're seeing the fruits of your labor come to life on the stage, and for good or ill. You can never be too married to the choices that you've made, because you should be ready to cut anything in service of the play. And in the theater, you're setting levels, both underneath actors' voices and for transitions and big moments, and working with lighting and direction and stage management and everything to make it work.
Putting it together, like we said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. It feels like every sound designer and / composer, sometimes the same person, has a slightly different process. For me too, yes, the phone call and the script. I've been doing theater for quite a long time, and I still don't understand how to read a script. So I'll read a script and I'll just be like, I know the words they're saying. I can't understand what's happening. Like, it's very hard for me to actually read a script and really understand. There's been a few where it really landed and I was able to kind of figure that out. But in general, I'm not that great. So I kind of like look at the story and get a sense of what it is and what the kind of story beats are and the kinds of energies that are embedded in the text. And then for me then is a conversation with the director, and very often they have a pretty something very strong. Like, I just hear a lot of rocks. Like that immediately to me, as to you, okay, that's great. That's a huge world that I can then navigate and try and make. Very often during those conversations, I start hearing things, like not in a bad way, but I start hearing music or pieces of sound that that seem to start emerging somehow in my mind, and then I go back home and I try to make them, and then I can't, because I have no training in music. I don't know how chords work or whatever. So I'll try and do those things, and eventually I'll make something that's kind of like that. But because I can't quite do that, I've made something new that I hadn't thought of before. And so this kind of, as I've mentioned to many people, I'm sure are tired of hearing this, but this process of failure is very useful, I think. This process of trying and failing has always been very generative for me. And so that is kind of the next process, the trying and failing, and seeing what arises from that process, and then kind of like slowly embedding yourself into the rehearsal process and sitting in the room. I like to sit in the room with my headphones on, making cues and watching people work through scenes and that kind of stuff, because it tells us a lot of stuff. It tells us, like, first, how are they staging this and what does that mean for the sound cue? And also you get a sense of like what the energy is in the room and what kind of things are starting to emerge as people work together, because, a script text on a page is very different than the text in the room. And text in the room with this group of people is very different than text in the room with that group of people. And kind of listening to all of those things that start to emerge as the play becomes a thing is really useful, because it's a kind of, they're signposts to help you work through the process of building the world. And then, of course, getting actually into the theater. You could play a sound cue in the rehearsal room through this crappy sound system, maybe, not always, because of various very deserving limitations as to what you can do in the rehearsal room. So you might be able to play a few cues and make sure things work, whatever, but actually playing it in a room with a tune system and with your sound tech and leveled all out. My favorite time in the whole process is that first moment where everybody's in there, they're in their street clothes, everyone's exhausted and they're hot because it's summer, and you're in the theater and it's dark and the company is there, you've done some cueing, and you play that first sound cue for everybody, and just watching those actors just kind of go, oh, like for them, I think it's because sound is so ephemeral and in some ways easily technically available, not easily, but easier than putting a whole entire giant set into a rehearsal space. But for that first on stage, usually you just have sound. And for them to kind of like respond to that and start to understand, there's something very visceral about sound that is, I always tell my students we have to use our powers for good rather than evil, because there's like a direct line to the amygdala, and it's so much more powerful than somebody like seeing half a set in their rehearsal because they need half a set because they have to figure out how to get up and down the stairs. But if you give them the sound, that is a real, that moment of playing that first sound cue, assuming it works, is a real beautiful time where you have the power or the responsibility or the honor to really kind of coalesce all the work that's been done up until that point. And it's a moment I never get tired of. And it's really like a huge responsibility. And so when we talk about world building and figuring out, okay, what is it? How do we do the things, the whatever? It's because of that first moment, the responsibility of that first moment, that first cue, to kind of transmit to the company and to yourself, like, how is this all going to come together? It's really special, and it's a very energizing time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, that first cue moment too. It underlines the importance of a sound designer getting time before introducing something new to the cast, making sure that it's at the very least at the correct volume, right? Because if you play something and it's too quiet, then people kind of get it. It is so visceral. Sound is so visceral, and you immediately know when something sounds wrong. Like, I'm sure we've all been victim to watching a film or a television show that, I don't know, they sent the actor into a different studio to do an overdub or something, but it just doesn't sound completely matched up to what you had previously seen. Stuff like that. Or directionality, where the direction of the sound doesn't match up with what you're expecting. But even something as seemingly insignificant as offering up a sound cue that's just at a level that's just a touch too low can throw people, and not like it can create a bad first impression, for lack of a better term. So you really want advance time to make sure that what you're going to put on offer is what you've envisioned.
Mm-hmm. You can integrate smoothly, nicely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great, this was quite early on in my sound design career, and I had a great lesson for that. We were doing a show at Soul Pepper Theatre in Toronto, and it was called The Just, and it was about the revolution in Russia. And the director was very adamant, like, no, I know the work you do, and I know how you like conjure these worlds or whatever. We are going to be in Tsarist Russia in this show. Like, I really want us to be there. And I was like, what do I know about the sound world of that? I can't play an instrument, and there's accordions, and like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But, the work came through. It was really great. But there's this, so what constantly happens is that we're in this apartment, and there's these revolutionaries that want to blow up the Tsar. They want to blow up somebody. Because the revolutionaries in Russia, and it's the 1800s or whatever it is. And what happens is like the doorbell would ring. And, a revolution would go out and do part of the plan and then come back. But they would ring the doorbell and come back in. And so I actually, instead of doing it digitally, I actually had a speaker way down a hallway because I had the extra channel. I had a speaker way down the hallway, and that's where I would play the doorbell out of. So it really hit that it was far away. It was like way down, you cut down a couple of flights and whatever. And I was really proud of that, because I was like little baby sound designer. And so I was talking to the director, and we were trying it, whatever, we were doing rehearsals. And at some point, the director said, I don't know about that doorbell. Can we try another doorbell? I was like, sure, we'll try another doorbell, no problem. It's very quiet, it's very faint, it's very far. And so we're doing a thing. We run the scene, and he's like, "Can we change the doorbell?" And I had like 3 or 4 that could have worked, so I switched it out. We just changed the sound file that gets played. We run the scene. The doorbell rings. It's different, and one of the actors stopped the scene. He was like, "What the hell?" And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "The doorbell." I'm like, "Yeah, I changed the doorbell." He goes, "Don't ever do that without telling us." And he was furious. He's a guy who gets furious, but he was rightly furious. He was really angry that you cannot do that to us. You have to tell us what you're doing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Never forgot it, mostly because I was terrified. But it was a great lesson to kind of realize the power of what we do and how delicate it is and how much responsibility we have to our fellow storytellers. I feel like in a way, we have to take care of our company as much as maybe not quite, but almost as much as the costume designers have to take care of the actors.
Interesting.
Like, I really feel
in
like
different
that.
ways.
In different ways,
Mm-hmm.
because costume. You're very vulnerable when you put on a costume, right? You've done all this work around your character. You've thought about it very deeply. You have a very strong idea. You're also an actor. You're just being very vulnerable out there. And if you get a costume where you're like, this is not right at all, it can be really upsetting. And, costume designers think a lot about that. You should come back if there's a costume designer, whatnot, forum event. And I feel like in some ways, like that moment made me realize, like, this is a very delicate process that we have to take a lot of care. You can't just change a doorbell.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I never forgot that.
Yeah. Putting mics on actors is also
That's
moment
a huge thing. Yeah.
Sometimes it's in the service of, if you want to have an effect on an actor's mic or on an actor's voice, then, you are forced to somehow mic that actor. If you want to have a moment where the actor's voice is big and boomy and reverberant and whatnot. Or sometimes it's purely a means of being able to hear the actor, period. In the 2017 R&J that I did, John Kirkpatrick played the doctor near the end of the scene, and we gave him, the costume was a plague doctor mask. So the long beak, right? But it completely obscured his voice. So, we put a wireless mic down the beak of the nose, got it to an acceptable level, and tried to EQ it so that it didn't sound as if it was a mic in a deep cone. But there are other moments, like, the suggestion of putting a mic on an actor whose vocal training may not be up to the par of other actors. That's a very vulnerable and, can be quite a touchy situation. And we do not approach it lightly. Like, it's always a conversation with, especially here, we have so many great resources for performers. It's always a discussion with the coaches, with the director, with the stage manager. We do tend to mic children in Shakespearean plays, simply because they just don't have the years or the lung capacity of vocal training yet. But miking adult actors is always a thing.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We should talk about composing, because that's the second thing in the title. And you've both mentioned it. You both kept saying about, as a sound designer / composer. So is it worth talking about how these things overlap and how they don't? You've both composed. Yes. Verne hesitantly nods.
Yes, I have. I don't like calling myself a composer. It's just,
why is that?
Because I'm not like a trained musician. I just noodle at best,
I'm not really trained either.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well. You're making music. You're a composer.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Well, I mean, what you were talking about before when we were going through this sort of process, at a certain point, you then just make sounds. And so, how is that different from composing? What is the difference in processes, maybe?
Well, I'll start with this one. So most of my work is in the city of Toronto, and almost always the composer and sound designer are the same person. So you deal with the cueing, you deal with all the sound design elements, and you also make original music, because no one can afford pre-composed music. It's very expensive. And so that the sound designer term is really conflated. Here at the Stratford Festival, there are two different things. There's music, and then there's the sound design. So usually I'm both of those things. And usually here I'm both of those people. So it's always been my experience that I kind of do both at the same time. And it's been really handy, because I can think about creating a piece of music that I can then parse, like, how am I making this? How is this going to work when I have to put it into QLab, which is our cueing software? How does it come in? How does it go out? So I can kind of like build all that into the compositional process. And so they're not really that different for me. I haven't done many shows where I was not the composer. and I was just the sound designer. Anne of Green Gables is one of those where we had a wonderful composer, and I did the sound design. So what the composer would do would be give me the music. I would put it into QLab and make sure it worked in the way that he thought it would work. And so there are different challenges when you're doing music for theater, because actors might take 36 seconds to do that monologue, or they might take 32 or 38, and they may not do it in 15 bars. Maybe they'll do it in 14 or 12. Or so, very often when I think about music, I try not to make music. I try not to make things dependent on, okay, we have to resolve to the one chord, or we have 16 bars for this. Like, I try not to make music like that. And I'm very interested in experimental music anyway. And so that is easy for me to do.
Right.
But there are a whole bunch of like structural considerations that one has to do when one composes for theater that's not a musical, that are very tricky. And I think we've probably learned without understanding. We've learned how to handle those structural considerations, and not every composer does. It's very interesting, like when I work with composers who don't do a lot of straight plays, to kind of explain to them the structures of like how we play back sound, how things go, and how you have to be able to go to the next cue at any time or shift the music. And there are ways around it for sure. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much the same. Yeah. Yeah. As you're talking about, the timing consideration, like that's always the concern, right? Is you can sit in your rehearsal hall and present a piece of music that you think will last this transition and into and under the next piece of text or whatever you're trying to do. But lo and behold, you hit the stage and they've shaved 6 seconds off, and now you're trying to, recompose and edit. And so I always approach it from trying for the most possible flexibility I can. And whether that's like for a show that I did at Blythe, that was the New Canadian Curling Club. It was, some nods. Yay. It was all, that play was about newcomers to Canada finding community at this curling club. And so the sound design for that show was all interesting world music covers of North American hits. So I found different pieces of music, but then I also created a bunch of original music that was all based on loops, so that no matter what, you would hit a certain point in the loop and it would just finish. And so I approach most compositions from a point of flexibility, and then noodling around to see what actually fits the vibe of the play the best. For Othello, because I'm not a musician. I'm certainly not a hip hop musician. That took a lot of R&D for me, just simply, listening to a bunch of hip hop music to try and get myself into the world of what that sounds like, what the beats sound like, what the different, the different heavinesses of different rap and hip hop sounds like. So yeah, there's a lot of research that goes into it as well.
Yeah.
And then I started composing that one in the November before we started rehearsing, and I would meet with our director Nigel starting in late November.
Right.
And just playing him like, would this work? Do you like this for the opener? And having conversations. And again, getting instant feedback from your director is always useful, because then, if they don't like it, it's like, oh, great, you don't like it. Now I have more information.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Or what to fix, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like there is overlap, but then there are some differences. It's interesting, these tensions, and sometimes you're the same person and sometimes you're not, and so how the conversations change. We've mentioned musical theater a couple times. I don't know how much you've each worked on musical theater, but do we want to talk about the differences between that and straight plays?
Never. And it's because I have so much respect for musical theater sound design and those teams. What they do is beyond my understanding. I will never understand it. I will never be not be terrified. Yeah. So
Same.
Yeah, but
Same.
you've worked on musicals. You're working on Annie.
Yeah, but in a very small and limited capacity. As I am operating from the booth, so I am at best a button pusher and a loft emergency technician should the need arise. So limited capacity for the musicals, but I did assist for a number of years on some musicals at the festival.
We should say there are spreadsheets involved. Like we should talk a little bit about what that is, because it's very different than working on straight plays. Mm-hmm. There's a much larger crew. There is an exponential amount of complexity that's involved when doing a musical. Can you go through that a bit for everybody?
Sure. The first thing is that everybody is wearing a mic. Everybody. So that means, for example, Billy Elliot, I think, was the highest RF count. RF just means wireless microphones. And Annie is, I think, 30, cast of 30. So each and every performer is mic'd. The primary performers are double mic'd, so that if one microphone gets sweaty, and in that case it would sound like this, which you can't really hear, then you can immediately flip over to the backup microphone. In addition to that, you've probably noticed the shape of the festival theater is strange, and you are almost surrounded by audience. With that in mind, the PA is also everywhere, and having a PA that is also almost everywhere with multi-directional microphones, that can create problems. So it takes a lot of work to tune the system, EQ the microphones, get them gain staged to the, proper gain level, etc. And then throughout the tech process, the audio mixer, in conjunction with the musical director and the director, figure out, and the sound designer, of course, they record snapshots in the console so that, the correct characters come up on different handles, and then Bob's your uncle. You're away and mixing a musical. But it's extremely challenging.
So for each scene, whoever's on stage, their mics are on. Whoever's off stage, their mics are off. That alone, when you're dealing with 30 mics, is like one person's job. It's the assistant, right? Is that who does that?
I mean, it's a team effort. Yeah.
But, somebody has to keep track of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that alone, okay, I would fail at that. The second part is, mixing people, making sure that they're audible, making sure that they're balanced. You have the band back there, which is in the festival theater behind that wall, right? So that is a whole thing, because there's a musical director. Everybody's looking at video screens because no one can see the stage. And everyone has like a video screen that shows, not everyone has a video screen that shows the stage, but certainly the drummer who's in a booth has a video screen that shows the musical director who's also playing piano and flipping. I don't know. It's bananas. That should be a form of it in itself. The complexity of that. It's really shocking to me.
Yeah. Okay. Wild. Great. Good stuff. Here's a good segue. You were talking about the weirdness of the festival stage, and when we were talking before, you had found an article from the late 50s where like an electroacoustic or an acoustic society was sort of studying the early festival stage. They're like, this is so weird. Let's study it. Mm-hmm. 2 very successful seasons of Shakespearean acting have taken place there. It was great. what are these different stages as a sound person? Like, how do you navigate them? Do you have a favorite? What is it like working on these 4 different stages?
I think what we should talk about a little bit, which is something that I think you probably have a better handle on this than I do. But I think what we often forget about is the physics of sound.
Mm-hmm.
Sound travels very slowly, as opposed to light, right? So it takes a long time, relatively speaking, for sound, for example, in the festival theater, somebody standing center, declaiming a monologue. If you're sitting way at the back over there, the sound is actually taking quite a long time to reach you. And so what we do in almost all the theaters is that there's reinforcement that is kind of like small speakers that are kind of invisible to you if you're not looking for them, all through the theater. And so that signal of that person speaking to you is sent to all these speakers in a very quiet way. Like, you don't want it to be like, oh, the sound is coming from that speaker. You want it to be transparent. And there are all sorts of mathematical acoustic properties that you have to handle, most of which is dealt with when you quote unquote tune a system and you make sure that everything is kind of aligned time-wise. So what it does is when you time align something and somebody's here and they're saying, let's say they clap their hands, what happens is that signal goes to that speaker that's feeding this area, that's covering this area. It's measured. Like we know how far it is. We know how fast sound travels. And so the signal coming out of that speaker is time aligned to what you see. So it sounds like you're hearing that instead of hearing the speaker that's covering your area. Mm-hmm. So that kind of physics of it, maybe you can talk a bit more about that. I find this whole thing very fascinating.
Yeah. Back in the day, when Peter McBoyle was still with us and was the resident sound designer, and he was the go-to sound designer for the musicals at the time. He implemented an interesting thing called delay zones. And so he carved up the festival stage and probably the Avon stage too, where if a performer wearing a lavalier, it was only really possible with the lavalier mics, right? So if a performer in a musical was wearing their little mic and they were standing downstage left, that would be the downstage left delay zone. He would, effectively hit a button on the console and it would send to certain speakers near that zone more than other zones. So that paired with the live energy of the voice in the room, it sounded more naturalistic. So it was like being reinforced in a more naturalistic way compared to simply hearing the voice coming from everywhere the same way all the time.
So the sound was located sort of roughly where the actor was.
Yeah, kind of like what bats do, right? Like the echolocation kind of thing. So yeah, that kind of approach.
Those kinds of physics that are baked into the systems here are the great thing about me coming in here is that I have to know that they're there. I don't have to understand them because I don't. But I can work with people who do understand them to make things so that I can design the sound, right? So that I can really build a picture that my technician or my head of sound or head of audio can then build technically. And the kind of and some people love it. Like there are sound designers who do what I do who know this very well. Like you understand this very well, certainly better than I do. But that is an element of each system in each theater that is kind of dialed in according to the actual space you're in. So in the studio theater, for those of you who've been there, much smaller. The audience is seated like so, and then the playing space is down here. You're surrounded by speakers very close to you. So there's a kind of immersivity in the studio that is way harder to get at a place like the Avon, where we're looking at a proscenium stage where people are right here, and that's where the acting is being done. So in terms of, I've worked mostly here at the Tom Patterson in the studio, and at the Avon. I've done a few shows, or just the one show it's just one show, I guess so, at the festival. But I do like the Tom Patterson and the studio, because this immersivity is something really fantastic, because I can put the audience inside the play in a way that you can't really manage when you're working in proscenium. You can do it somewhat in the festival too. I haven't quite figured out that room yet. I haven't done enough work there, but it's a weird room. It's so weird. But I really like doing that. I really enjoy putting the audience inside, because that really is the goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
To put you inside the story and to play with the tension of the stories out there. Oh, the story's in here, or the story's somewhere in between, and the tension of those places, or some elements of the story are actually, am I hearing that? Or is that happening on stage? Or is it happening behind me? Like all those kinds of architectural considerations around building a sound world are very present when you're in the Tom Patterson and the studio. So I do like those spaces more, I have to say.
Mm. I've mostly designed at the festival. And when I say it's a weird room, it's my favorite weird room. I do love it a lot. And I love it because it is actually more forgiving for the naked human voice than for anything that I can put through a sound system. What the challenge is in that room is, because the audience is almost surrounding you, and the PA is mostly central, you end up with basically a mono application of sound. So you have to kind of throw out the stereo way of thinking and hearing, because you're never really going to get a true left and right experience in that room. The other challenge in that room is directionality of like sound effects. Like if you need something to sound like it's coming from a certain place, that room presents a challenge, because holy crap, you're going to annoy some poor person who is sitting next to the vom.
You were talking about horses.
Horses. Oh my God. Julius Caesar, if I had seen a horse after that show, I would. Yeah, the challenge of making a horse disappear down the left vom and then appear, realistically travel to the rear of the auditorium is a challenge. So, you have, I don't know, what is it, 100? It's like 98 speakers in there or something. You have that many speakers with which to play, and yet it's always a little bit of a headbutt on finding the right way to triangulate things to make them seamlessly move around the space without scaring the life out of someone.
Yeah. I think I have in my life many times dealt with things like that and being so unsatisfied with the result, and kind of going again with this the doorbell play. They're at the window, and the Czar's coach comes across, and we were in the middle, and then we had audience on two sides, so I had speakers all the way around, and so the carriage went along. Very unsatisfying, because it's not real.
I know,
right? And I think the sometimes we're stuck, but I remember. So one of my favorite bands is a band called Sonic Youth, and a long time ago I bought a record of theirs, and it was back in the days of CDs. Some of you might remember, and I remember opening the CD and I was looking at the liner notes, and there was a quote by somebody, I forget who it was, that was in the thing, and it said, "The minute the music leaves your head, it's compromised." And I always thought of that, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a we're dealing with make-believe, Right? And so whenever I always push back and sometimes, yeah, you're stuck. You have to make the horse go down and around the thing and the whatever. But, like every time I see something like that or somebody asks me something like that, I really think about like, it's never going to be that. And that's often I tell people, like when I tell directors and they're like, I really want this thing to happen. And I'm like, yeah, we can make it happen. It's not going to be that thing though. It's going to be something. And so what is the thing that it ends up being in reality? And how do we work with that to tell the story of that thing? Because, as I work in theater and I work more and I get older and I think about sound in many different ways, if we all stepped outside and stood by the water, there is nothing, even with all the genius that is here at the Stratford Festival, all of us sound designers, all of us composers, all of us technicians who do audio, if we went outside and stood by the water there, and then we went into Tom Patterson, there is no way we could make that thing. It's impossible. There's no way we can make that thing because it's not just the sound. It's the feel of the wind on our bodies. It's the smells in the air with the fertilizer today is really rocking. Like the airplanes passing overhead. We could put all those sound elements into a system. It's not the thing. And I think kind of coming to peace with that has been a big part of my work. Just kind of realizing, okay, it's not the thing. It is a thing. And it is a thing that we can use and talk about and work with to tell a story, but it will never be the thing. And so I think about that a lot whenever I make a soundscape or I try to make a piece of music. It's never the thing. So what is the thing? And what are we listening to? And what is the thing we're listening to? And what is the story of that thing? Rather than just going, we want to make this other thing that will never happen, So it's not it's not a limitation that cheapens the experience. It's just like, this is different.
Definitely.
We're doing something different.
This is not a pipe.
It's not a pipe. This is not a pipe.
It's the sound design of a pipe.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's the sound design of a pipe. Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to ask you guys about some of your specific experiences sound designing and composing. If you want to talk about, you said you were excited to talk about your most complex sound design, Verne. I wonder if you want to start there. Most complex sound design that you enjoyed?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe those might be different things. Enjoyment, complexity, I don't know.
No. Sometimes yes. Sometimes you can enjoy a sound design for its complexity and not love the end result. But for me, the one and the same usually go together. I like sound designs where I'm pushed, especially by a director, to go further. I like sound designs where it's immediately just insane and I don't know how I'm going to do it. One such show was for Red Sandcastle Theatre for Eric Wolf, who is a Toronto hilarious, so talented playwright, director, artistic director,
puppeteer
of Eldritch Theatre.
Mm-hmm.
He does shows with puppets, and they're madcap and zany and just so strange. And I think 2 years ago, I did a sound design for him, wherein one of the plot points was that there was a piece of strange opera that played to this maddening crescendo that called forth Norse gods and, life-size worms that devoured the earth. And I was like, oh, how am I going to create this opera? So I wrote a strange atonal, demonic sounding opera that essentially almost never got heard until this one moment. So it plays along in the background of this one thing, in addition to just tons of monster sounds and, worms devouring the earth and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that whole thing, that whole chestnut.
Standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my most complex and probably most fun sound design that I've done. 39 Steps was up there too.
That was amazing.
It was so fun.
Crazy, yeah.
And that was kind of in my, beginning years of being a sound designer as well. So that was pretty gratifying to just, again, the most hilarious cast and doing some everyday ensemble work that you just go, I cannot believe how funny these people are. And getting to record them doing their thing and then playing back this whole thing and making a sound design out of it was just, it was such a joy.
So there it sounds like you were working a lot with the cast, which is a thing we hadn't really talked about before. Yeah, cool.
So funny.
Mm-hmm. Deb, do you have a design that jumps to mind?
The immediate thing I think about when I think about complexity, I think about the shows in which how do I put this? I think about the shows in which I was surprised and honored to be in the room. When I was involved in stories that I didn't stories that were really visceral and very important, but were outside of my own experience. And I think Death and the King's Horseman was one of those. I did a show called Secret Life of a Mother by Hannah Moscovich, which was a Mev Beatty monologue. And it was about miscarriages and those kinds of difficulties. And I just remember being in the room and being kind of not overwhelmed. Well, yeah, a bit overwhelmed, feeling so entrusted in helping tell those stories, even though I've never had a miscarriage, right? I'm male. I don't have miscarriages. So that kind of their experiences and their vulnerability, and the director was Anne-Marie Kerr, and being in the room for those conversations and trying to help tell those things as someone. So being really just kind of going oh, I have a huge responsibility here. And how do I stay out of the way? How do I make this show not about me? Right? Those are very complicated things. Death and the King's Horseman, when we worked on it, I don't know how many of you have seen it, but about pre-independence Nigeria, and working through the conversations with the cast about so many of the cast, even though they were Black, were not from Nigeria. And Professor Soyinka was very adamant about the place being Nigeria before revolution and before independence, and all those kinds of things. Another show like that was Wedding Band, which was a very difficult show to be in the room for. And Sam White, who was the director, who kind of beautifully navigated this not horribly, it's the reality of Black life in the South before the war, I guess. And the language was really intense, and just kind of being in those rooms and kind of going, okay, how do I tell this story? How do I contribute? How do I stay out of the way? How do I lift up the themes and the experiences that are being told in this room? Death and the King's Horseman, we had a beautiful live percussion quartet that played, and they're playing rhythms and songs and accompanying the spirit speaker and the main character, and the conversation. Not to say that it was a difficult conversation, but just kind of going, okay, what am I hearing here? How is it how do I participate here in a way that is uplifting to the story, in a way that doesn't complicate all the difficult things that these people are navigating right now. And ultimately, those shows, when I think back about it, them technically, they weren't, flash bang. They weren't like a lot of I had a lot of 800 cues, which we've both had shows like that. But the navigation of that conversation and being in the room with people and being in the room with those stories, those I found have always been the most complicated. And I think I'm really glad I got the chance to be in those rooms for those stories at that time in my life, when I was more of an experienced sound designer, because I feel like I served those stories much better than I would have done if I was 22 or however old I was when I started.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you both. Those are great answers.
By the way, the 39 Steps was so great.
Aww.
It was so great.
Yeah, nice. I have a big stack of questions from the audience here, which is great.
Let's do it.
Thank you all. We may not get through all of them, but we'll do what we can.
So many sound nerds. It's awesome.
It's fantastic. All right. What brought you into the world of sound design and composing? Why did you choose live theater? I don't know. Who wants to start with that?
Go ahead.
How'd you begin?
I don't know your story.
No, my origin story?
Please.
I always say that I got into sound out of spite.
Excellent reason.
Yes. I had started theater as a performer. I went to university hoping to be an actor, and then the thought of auditioning scared me. And I was also broke during university, so I went into the technical side of things to earn a little coin. But I was a lighting person for the longest time. And sound confused me so much. And it just seemed like, I don't know, how do I make this stuff work? It's just too many things. So I wanted to learn about all those things that I didn't understand. So I got into it out of spite.
Great.
I was going to make it work come hell or high water. And then I got a grant from Theatre Ontario at a certain point to follow a sound designer around for a summer, which I did. And I followed Todd Charlton around for a summer, mostly doing Blythe stuff. And so I learned about editing and sound design for theater, sound systems. And then for some reason, people just started calling me a sound designer. So I just started doing sound design.
Yeah, you'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
I started doing this kind of by accident. I was set on becoming a musician. So I was doing quite a lot. I was very busy as a musician, and I was living at the time with John Zosky, who is doing Macbeth and has done much at Shaw and everywhere. I'm sure you've all seen some of his shows. And he, at the time, the technology, like computers, were just starting to come out. Digital sound was just starting. And so there was a huge kind of bar to cross to have the technology to be able to do the work that we needed to do to make sound for theater. QLab was on version 2 or something. It's on version 5 now. And because there were only like 6 people in Toronto who had the gear to do it, he was very busy. And so very often he would double book himself, and I was living with him and we were using the same software when that mattered. And so he would have me babysit some of his shows. And so that's kind of like how I started spending time in those rooms during tech, just kind of sitting there and watching things happen. I didn't really have to do much other than make sure nothing blew up. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I got introduced to that world, which is kind of hilarious because my sister, who's a writer and an actor and went to NTS, and I would go see her shows, but it just never occurred to me that, this could be something I do. After those kinds of things, people would kind of know me and they knew that I was a percussionist and stuff. So I would start doing I would be the live musician on stage, but it was always about music. Mm-hmm. And then my first kind of real sound designs were like in 2011, 2012. And that's kind of when I started to kind of understand that oh, this is a different thing. This is not just playing music. This is something else. And I've always been interested in storytelling. I have a sound sonic arts practice that is very heavily based in that. And so that was kind of where I started to think like, oh, this is interesting. I'm working with other people, but it's not a band. Like, oh, this is making me think about different things. So I just became more and more curious.
Cool.
It's totally by accident.
That's great. Both of these stories are kind of like, I was doing something else and then caught my eye.
The first time I worked with Deb was I was assistant lighting designer on a show, and you were the pit musician for the Peggy Baker, Michael Healy
Are
thing.
you okay? Yeah,
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah, at Factory.
that's right.
Nice. Oh, that's nice. You talked a bit about QLab and gear. There's a question here. What are you composing on? A keyboard? Like, what is the gear that you use for this sort of stuff?
I have a pretty basic setup. I have some microphones, and I have a little MIDI keyboard, and I use a program called Logic, which is based in Apple. I've been through a bunch of different programs like that, and Logic is kind of like a multi-track recorder. You can make songs. You can have like a track of vocals and some drums and some other things, and they are also what they call plugins that are synthesizers or samplers or other sort of sound generating material that you can use a MIDI keyboard to play or interact with them in other ways. Of course, there are many sound libraries that we both use probably. Very often, kind of like what you were saying about the rocks. Like I was like, wow, I wish a director had told me that they just wanted to do rocks, because that would be super awesome. So there's because it's digital and the sound is digital, you can use samples of sounds like landslides and whatever, and do all sorts of things to them, like stretch them and compress them, put them in like huge reverberant spaces or underwater or all sorts of things. So nothing special really, pretty standard stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
What? Well, okay, maybe it is a bit special. I don't know.
But there isn't like a sound designer X instrument.
No,
it's got a big toot, like a Dr. Seuss thing.
No.
Verne, you have anything to
add? Basically the same. Yeah. I work on a MIDI keyboard with Logic as well, and plugins aplenty, and a pretty big sound library by now, but I have my favorites. I always go back to.
And that sound library sounds like you have built it up over the years. Is that right? Or
yeah, I mean, it's there are sound libraries available for purchase for professional use. It's all royalty free sound effects that are put together by a couple of studios that work out of probably Hollywood on sound stages and whatnot. But yeah,
cool. Yeah, I again, when I was working on this project with the sound designer, my mom got me sort of as a gag gift a vinyl LP of like sound effects.
Yeah.
So we'll put that on every now and then. It's like, yeah, caw. Yeah, there was like sounds of the Bushveld as well.
Oh
like
gosh, yeah.
Lions. Yeah. All right. If given the choice, is it preferable to have live sound effects or pre-recorded ones? How do you make the choice? So the difference between having recorded sounds versus live musicians, for instance, or live sound.
I think generally the problem is either logistics or mechanics. Like, how would it work? Where would we put it? How do we mic that so it gets into the giant space of the festival? Sometimes it's just easier to use a recorded sound effect because of whatever other workflow difficulties there might be. Yeah,
I would agree.
Yeah,
I mean, even on Annie this year, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 sound cues that Dave Campion recorded. It's his drum playing, but because of whatever else is happening musically at the time, he wasn't able to do these hits, and they're all accents on dancers jumping. So it's like a rim shot and a rim shot and a badoom. So it's always the consideration of why, how, and who can do this thing, and it's all the same considerations, live versus pre-recorded. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For something like sound effects, though, like if we're talking pure sound effects,
right.
I would go pre-recorded all the time because you have way more control over it.
Yeah, consistency.
Yeah, rather than like Foley, which is fun.
Big sheet
but
of
like,
metal to make the
it's
thunder.
fun.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Foley, but
Yeah.
if you want something that's really, you can have a thunder sheet, which is cute, or you can have a really big thunderstorm, which is more effective.
Exactly. Yeah. This is a question about working with directors. How much does a director direct you? I guess this is getting back to the conversation with the director. And then there's a second part. Has a director ever cut a sound effect you personally chose or designed?
Oh, for
Cut?
sure.
No, never.
All the time.
Never happened.
I love cutting cues.
That's my favorite thing.
Yeah, get back to the story.
Yeah.
Is this not needed? Great.
Great, cut it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I remember. Yeah, like it's so funny, and whenever you're like, yeah, let's cut that sound cue, everyone laughs, right? They just think it's hilarious, but it's like, no, I totally don't want that anymore, and I'm not at all sad about it. Like I am very happy to cut my work because I can use it somewhere else. And it's like getting in the way. Like, why would I get in the way of this beautiful thing that's happening now? My favorite story, I'm sure you've all heard it, or maybe not. Maybe none of you have heard it. Some of you have heard it. Long time ago, I was at this dinner. I was very intimidated. There were all these fancy people. And one person was asking me, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I was a theater sound designer. I do things in theater. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I was explaining to her, like, well, any sound you might hear in a play, I do that kind of stuff. But I was being very timid about it because sometimes I'm like that. And she's like, look, I don't understand what you're talking about. How about this? And she said, what about the Scottish play? The Scottish play? Anyway, double, toil and trouble, right? The Three Witches. Yeah. Okay. What would you do for that? Like, what would your job be in that scene? And the first thing that came out of my mouth, which I have dined on out for decades now, I tell all my first year students this, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, what does the magic sound like? Yeah, there's just that thing and the bubbling cauldron and the ravens and the cave or the field or the whatever.
The heath.
The heath, thank you. Yes, okay, right. Thunder, cloud, lightning, whatever. That's not, yeah, okay, fine, I'll do that. But what does the magic sound like? What am I listening to here? They're conjuring these, they're looking back into time or forward into time and back. I don't know. They're looking into time. That's heavy, right? Like, what does that sound like? That's my job there. Mm-hmm. That is really like, okay, yes, I can put, okay, yes, you want a distant raven, fine. That's no problem. So those kinds of things, like whenever a director comes to me and says, hey, we need to be really scary here. It's like, dude, listen to what they're saying. It's terrifying. I don't have to do that. And so sometimes the director comes to me and says, hey, you know what? We don't have to do that. It's already being done. And let's cut that sound cue. Love it. Love doing it. That being said, there are directors in which I have never, ever, ever had a conversation directly about my work. Alan Dilworth, who lives in Stratford now, we've done many shows together. We have never talked about what things sound like.
That's
ever.
so cool.
Never.
Wow.
We just talk about the story, and he talks about the vibe and the thing and time. He really likes to talk about time. And we talk about the text and the story. And I always show up with a bunch of sound. And he's like, okay, yeah. Oh, yes, I see. What about, can we start that a little earlier? We've never talked about content at all, ever.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there are a number of directors that I've worked with that are like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's surprising.
Neat.
Do you have anything to say about directors, Verne?
Oh, she has something to say.
I love direction. I need direction. Like I find that I need some sort of path on which to trod or boundaries or something. Because if you're given a boundary, you're given, I find
you can be creative within the boundary, right? Yeah.
I like having like a path. Because then I know what the world is and I can play within it. So yeah, getting direction from the director of like, it's tough. I'd imagine it's tougher with lighting designers because how can you describe light? But I really urge, especially new directors, to use like just adjectives to start out with. If they don't know kind of where the sound world lives and what they want to hear, like, okay, in this moment, is it sparkly? Is it heavy? Just getting used to naming the adjective that they want the feel of whatever scene to have is useful for me.
Rather than, for instance, getting bogged down in like, could we add, a string here?
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
right.
they don't need
'cause what does
to
that tell you?
name the instrument.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
And then like cutting cues, I've only ever fought for one cue. And it was
Did you win?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. What was it?
And it was in Hirsch. It was it was to immediately set the like the approach during Hirsch, because it was a play about plays, and it was in different locations. The object was to immediately set the scene with something sound related, and then just get it out of there. So this one scene change, we needed to understand that we were backstage, and I had a distant hammer, and it sounded really realistic, like they were working backstage. And the director wanted to cut it. And I'm like, but it does its job, and we tried it without it, and he was like, "No, put it back." So yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Nice.
But it's always about the storytelling.
Yeah.
If it was just because I liked the cue,
Right.
I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
get
a really
back to the
beautiful
story.
hammer you got. Yeah.
Right?
We'll see what you make of this one. What new innovations in sound design do you think we will see in the future? Or, what's going on right now that is sort of new, that's exciting? We were talking about an update to QLab recently.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
thrilling.
The chat now is all about AI everywhere, right?
Of course.
So,
Of course.
and again, technology is a double-edged sword.
Mhm.
With the great things that it can give, it can take so much away. So there are conveniences that are introduced from AI, certainly more and more with editing. If you are, say, filming something and you're using one mic and there's another mic in the room, and there's a fault on the one mic, you can use AI editing software to kind of get the best of both worlds and smooth out the edges in the recording. Things like that are time saving can be useful, but the fact that AI is now being used everywhere to replicate human artistry is kind of a drag, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it's a difference which I don't hear talked about too much when there is a lot of conversation about AI. You're talking there about an application of the technology that can kind of help in a technical way rather than in a generative, quote unquote creative way.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that both of those things are talked about as AI. And so, you get people making extreme blanket statements of like, well, it's going to be the end of the world, or it's going to, change the world and for the better. But it's a mix of both. Like there are benefits and drawbacks, as you say.
Yeah, I think so. I work a lot in the international AI space in field, in domain, whatever you want to call it, in sound and creative work. And there's a lot of talk about that right now. And I think one of the most useful things I've come across is to say, well, first of all, it's not intelligence. It's pattern recognition and statistical models. That's really what it is. It's not generative. It's not thinking. It's not doing any of those things. And so one of the really useful illustrations that I came across is think about the word transportation. Transportation means a rocket ship, means a scooter, means a skateboard, means a car, means a bus. They're all transportation. And I think what we're forgetting, or what has never really been explained from all the Silicon Valley tech bros, is that AI is a word like transportation. There's many different things it can do. There's many things it can do very well, and there's many things it can't do at all.
Mm-hmm.
And never will be able to do. I think, because I work in the creative space with AI and interrogate the models and the discourse around what it is being talked about, like the research group that I'm part of is really looking at machine learning as a collaborative tool and like in a collaborative community space. And so what we're thinking about is like really investigating its failures and its what it can't do and where that leaves us. I think what the thing to remember with AI and machine learning, I'm just going to say machine learning. In fact, I don't want to even say learning. The thing I want to talk about, like when we talk about algorithmic tools and statistical recognition, pattern recognition models, which is what these things are, is that there's always a gap between what the tool can do, even when we talk about quantum computing and larger data sets, which are their own problem, what the tool can do and what we can do as human beings and what we're doing as human beings. And there will always be a gap there, I think, like always. There will never, well, it's kind of like what I was talking about, like if we go outside and listen to the riverbank and then we go into the theater and listen to the riverbank, it's a different thing entirely. And I think that gap is always going to be there. And what we're doing is we're seeing that gap change and narrow. And some of the things that are based on, frankly, capitalist modes of production where we have to make a video game really fast. Oh, let's use AI to generate backgrounds. And so now we've lost all these jobs. Those kinds of things. AI is very good at that because it's trained on what came before. So what is coming next, it's not trained on that and doesn't know how to do that, but we do. So there'll always be a gap, I think. And there'll always be, that gap is the space wherein we are creative, artistic, emotional people. And that will always be present for sure. That being said, there are lots of tools where you can take a track and take out the vocals really fast, or take out the bass or the drums or whatever. But that's all it can do. If I give it a field recording from India, which is the material that I often work with, and I say, okay, take out the vocals from this track, it goes insane.
Yeah, of course.
And it's great because, like, oh, look at this crazy thing that I can now tell a story about. It's very interesting, I think.
That's great. Okay, I think we're just about out of time, but I think that's a very lovely place to end, thinking about this, technology and creativity as we've been talking about for this whole thing, and the future and all of this. I want to thank you both so much for all of your thoughts and insight. I want to thank you all for coming. And you were mentioning before you should come back if there's one about costume design, not this year, but recorded on a podcast that you can go listen to right now on Stratfest at Home. We did a panel last year where we had a costume designer on talking about fops and dandies, because they were talking about London assurance and all sorts of things. And so we talked about costume design at that. So you can listen to that now. Thank you all so much again. Thank you both. Have a great rest of your Friday.
Thank you for having us. Thanks, James.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to keep up with the lively conversations and original performances on the Stratford Festival streaming service, Stratfest at Home. And for making it this far in the episode, enjoy 1 month for free. Visit stratfestathome.ca and enter code FREEMONTH. It takes you, our listeners, to make this possible. It also takes the support of our dear collaborators. Support for the Meighen Forum is generously provided by Kelly and Michael Meighen and the TR Meighen Family Foundation. Original score for the Everyday Forum podcast was provided by Hilary Adams. Production support is provided by the film production and distribution team at the Stratford Festival. That is coordinator Vilma Mancini and director Jenna McGaw. The Meighen Forum team is producing assistant Renata Hansen, associate coordinator James Hyett, manager Gregory McLaughlin, and director Julie Miles. Special thanks to Mike Duncan, Greg Doherty, and Harper Charlton. Finally, thanks to artistic director Anthony Cimolino and executive director Anita Gaffney. From here in Stratford, Ontario, on the land of the Neutrals and the Anishinaabe, see you next time. Ba Ma Pi.